Governor, and just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check.
Thank you to everyone who joined the Gaslit Nation VP debate watch party in our victory chat on Patreon. It was a painful night having to stare at JD Vance for 2 long hours, but we managed to get through it together. I did wake up feeling a little hungover, even though I didn't drink. Kremlin disinformation agents like JD Vance make me incredibly uncomfortable, as they clearly do Tim Walz. I think that and the stupid Tiananmen Square non-scandal may have gotten to his head a little bit, which is why he had a bit of a fumble at the start. But it's not about how you start, it's about how you finish. And I want to say about that Tiananmen Square story, the story originated from a local news network, but it hit the mainstream media with the New York Times publishing their piece 3 hours before the debate. What's ironic here is that the truth is actually far more interesting, which Walz, I thought, made clear in the debate, and it was this. Despite the dangers of the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989, where several hundred to several thousands of people were killed for daring to stand up to China's brutal dictatorship, and we don't know the number because China censors the story. Many Americans canceled their trips to China. Walz went ahead, moving to China as a young man on a teaching program during what was an incredibly tense and charged time. To me, that's far more interesting and says more good things about him every time I turn on the mainstream media, like I had to watch this VP debate. I'm always reminded, oh, this is why Gaslit Nation exists. Leave it to our media, which is dying, being killed by the same hedge funds supporting Trump, and America's dumb business elite like David Zaslav, the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, which owns CNN, which will now paywall its stuff because Zaslav, a Trump supporter, is so bad at business, like Trump, he lost the rights to show the NBA, and he's destroying HBO and many other beloved companies. Anyway, I digress. My point is this. The Tiananmen Square story is Hillary Clinton's emails, and our media establishment wants Trump back because his American carnage boosts their ratings and turn their conformist reporters into Woodward and Bernstein simply for daring to ask Trump a question at a press conference instead of confronting all the corrupt and failing systems that gave rise to Trump in the first place. Because that would take a lot of money and work. Investigative journalism is costly and time-consuming. Trump's reality show of terror is a lot cheaper to report on, and it gets views. Because Americans are clinging to the news to find out whether we're all going to survive in the coming years or be sent off to camps. So all of this is to say, I believe JD Vance lost the debate because he comes across as a guy who you never want to leave alone with your daughter. He has a college dude bro date rapist vibe. He drones on. He wears way too much eyeliner. Whereas Walz came across as human, speaking directly to the voter at home, and passionate about programs to make our lives easier. Simply put, Walz seemed warm. JD Vance seemed cold and creepy. And Walz got better as the night went on. You may be wondering, but what about all that brotherly love he was showing Vance at the end of the debate, which made Vance's face melt into a big smile? You could see it on his face. Vance loved getting pat on the head by Coach Walz. But then Walz flips the script by asking him about January 6th, which Vance, of course, denied ever happened, and Walz should have pressed it again, among other things he didn't bring up, like Vance being owned by Peter Thiel. But Walz did something that I want you all to pay close attention to. At the end of that debate, as he was being folksy with Vance, modeling to Americans what it's like to have a friendly debate where we can come together to discuss our common ground. And that's significant because a lot of families are divided right now over MAGA, right? We're losing loved ones, neighbors, friends, parents to the MAGA cult. I hear about it all the time from Gaslit Nation listeners. So this divisiveness, this toxicity, it's in our families where people are just slamming doors, not talking to each other. It's polarization that's driving our country apart. And it's driven by social media. It's driven by right-wing disinformation networks. It's driven by Russian bots, and on it goes. And it's driven by paid off MAGA influencers, as those recent DOJ indictments confirmed. And so Walz was showing this is how to have a discussion with someone you don't agree with and you find common ground. And yeah, Vance's common ground was all gaslighting. He was lying on that stage. He was saying he has positions we know for a fact he doesn't have. The man will ban abortion. He will ban IVF. Will do whatever his backers want him to do. That is who he is. He's an empty shell of a human being. He's a hollow man. So one might also assume wrongly that Walz was trying to force Americans to unite with Nazis that want to genocide us, and that therefore makes Walz complicit in the fascist takeover of our country. But that's not it. Instead, Walz was clearly signaling, hey, MAGA, when Kamala Harris and I win the election, do not unleash a wave of terror. Accept the results peacefully and work with us to find common ground. I believe he did that all because the internal polling for the Harris-Walz campaign is much better than the polar coaster in the media, with many polls tainted by fake Republican polls inflated to increase confidence and therefore donations to their campaigns. We talked about disinformation in polls in a recent episode. So Walz was trying his very best in the VP debate to not dog walk Vance across the stage like Harris dog walked Trump. I was expecting Walz, the guy who coined weird, to unleash on Vance in a way he absolutely can. Yes, he's a teddy bear, but he's a competitive guy, having coached football, and he's run for office a million times. So why dial up the nice guy camaraderie? Harris and Walz are getting ready to win and are doing what they can to prepare for the legal warfare and terrorism that is going to be unleashed in the months between Election Day and Inauguration Day. Here's a clip.
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he did. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
In this special bonus episode, I'm going to answer a pressing question from a Gaslit Nation listener at the Democracy Defender level who works with a small business owner who is convinced that Trump will be better for small businesses. After all, he played a businessman on TV on NBC's The Apprentice. But is that true? And how can this Gaslit Nation listener get through to this person to save them from voting against their interests? I put together this segment for all those out there who may be struggling with a similar situation, and I hope it helps. Look to the show notes for my research, including helpful tips provided by the same Gaslit Nation listener on how to effectively communicate in a time of hyperpolarization. I will link to those resources in the show notes. Thank you to everyone at the Democracy Defender level and higher who submitted a question. If you want to submit your questions and hear this full bonus show, be sure to subscribe at patreon.com/gaslit. That's patreon.com/gaslit. If you didn't hear your question answered this week, look out for it soon. I read everything you send me. Your questions shape the show. Now let's begin. During the COVID pandemic, Congress passed the PPP, the $2 trillion Paycheck Protection Program, providing emergency loans to small businesses of all kinds. It helped save our economy. Even though this was a bipartisan act of Congress, Donald Trump made sure his name was on the checks that went out. The PPP helped a lot of people who needed it. I was in a Greek restaurant in Brooklyn at the time these checks were going out, and the owner of the restaurant was proclaiming to the whole restaurant, I got my check, and I know whose name is on my check. That's Donald Trump. So that works. That works with people. The PPP also became a target of corruption, with several super rich Trump cronies and super rich Trump supporters stealing millions from the program, depriving mom and pop stores that desperately needed that money. One now famous example of this is football star Tom Brady, who is worth $200 million, yet he got a $1 million loan from the PPP for his supplements company. Why? Because he's friends with Trump. That's the level of corruption you're going to see, including tax cuts for the super rich, paid for by the poor and middle class if Trump becomes president again. Trump will also turn America into a black hole of corruption, which is also bad for small businesses. After inheriting a fortune from his father, Trump went bankrupt several times. No credible banking institution would loan to him, so he became dependent on Russians buying up his properties, including the Russian mafia running an illegal gambling den in Trump Tower that got busted by the FBI. Trump has a long history of breaking the law. He was found guilty, for instance, just one example, by a Manhattan jury that included a Trump supporter in the Stormy Daniels election interference hush money case. There's a long list of ongoing court cases and investigations against Trump, proving that Trump thinks he's above the law. He has been banned from operating a business in New York State for financial crimes, a state that has been his home base for decades. New York essentially kicked him out because he was too corrupt for New York. But now he's right at home in DeSantis' Florida, which lets insurance companies rip people off, which one investigation shows that I'll link to in the show notes. Back to New York. In New York, a court forced Trump to shut down his fake charity because he and his family were pretending to raise money for good causes, lying to people, and instead the Trumps used their charity as a piggy bank. Once again, Trump thinks he can live above the law and steal from people. Trump is lawless. If Trump becomes president again, he will destroy the rule of law in America, and all small businesses will be forced to budget for paying bribes in order to keep their business afloat. How do I know that? Because that's how it's done in countries like Russia, which is run by people like Trump, who think they're above the law and can steal. Like Trump, who has refused to pay so many vendors that it limits where he can hold his rallies because he still owes money to various venues. He has a decades-long history of refusing to pay small businesses. So that alone should make small business owners not want to vote for him. In Russia, it's common for businesses to be taken over by people like Trump, the entire business stolen, the business owner killed or thrown in prison. That is essentially what Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, is advocating for, calling on a Trump administration to seize organizations like universities and the Ford Foundation, which gives out grants to social programs. That is what is commonly done in Russia. If you're not obedient to us, you dare to challenge us, we're going to liquidate you. That's what JD Vance wants to do. So if you are a small business owner and you're thinking of voting for Trump, you better start saving your money now to pay enough bribes over the coming years so that they won't harass you and threaten to shut you down. That is what will happen because Trump is lawless, and his own SBA allowed the well-intentioned PPP to become a huge criminal scandal that is still being investigated to this day. Now, by clear contrast, the Biden-Harris administration are strengthening the rule of law in America, including launching investigations to go after the stolen PPP money and exposing powerful people, including Trump's friend Tom Brady. They've expanded the capital resources for small businesses. They even sent out COVID relief checks. But unlike Trump, Biden did not put his name on the checks because that's typically not done since the money is approved by Congress. Yet Trump, being greedy, wanted all the credit. 18.1 million new businesses have been formed in the U.S. since Biden took office, a record since 2004. Isabel Guzman, head of the Small Business Administration, credits the SBA support for the surge in entrepreneurship. Guzman highlights that the Biden administration's American Rescue Plan, infrastructure package, and CHIPS and Science Act have driven new investments, aiding a small business boom. The Biden-Harris administration increased access to capital for small businesses. The president's proposed budget prioritized unprecedented lending support through the SBA's business lending programs, ensuring small businesses have greater access to the capital they need. All right, folks, brace yourselves because we're talking big numbers. The Biden-Harris administration launched a program that had $178.6 billion. That's right, the kind of money you can barely comprehend because you're a billionaire thinking, yeah, I've got that in my couch cushions. This historic investment in small businesses by Biden-Harris is a $15.7 billion bump from last year. And what does this pile of cash do? It props up over 1 million solid, well-paying jobs across industries like tech, manufacturing, and construction. What's more, Biden-Harris pushed for a new program where the SBA would give out microloans, but that proposal got killed by Republicans backed by the banking industry because that basically meant the SBA would be competing with their banks. All right, so blame Republicans for that not going forward. All of this is to say that Biden-Harris increased capital and other resources for small businesses more than Trump did. And yeah, they even sent relief checks. But unlike Trump, they didn't waste millions of taxpayer dollars on their rich friends, depriving the small business owners who needed that. Any small business owner that thinks, oh, the SBA under Trump was great, I got free cash, but so many people that needed that cash didn't because millions went to Trump's own friends. And that's going to get worse if Trump gets into the White House. And here's where it gets really interesting. Minority-owned businesses got a bigger slice of the pie too. It's all part of the Biden-Harris administration's push for equity, ensuring that more businesses get a chance to succeed while still making the pie bigger for everyone. Because let's face it, the only thing better than pie is more pie. So who would be far, far better for small businesses? The answer is obvious. Harris and Walz. Trump will turn America into a black hole of corruption and no small business will be safe. So unless you want to throw your money away paying bribes to stay in business, like in Russia, vote for Harris and Walz. Now, here's a continuation of our interview with the great Greg Palast, known for his investigative reports for The Guardian and the author of the best-selling book, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and the new must-see film, which you can watch for free at saveyourvote.org, Vigilantes, Inc., all about what the KKK is up to these days, suppressing the vote in Georgia, trying to ensure Republican hostage states stay Republican hostage states. Thank you to everyone who joined our live taping, and thank you for your questions. Look out for another Gaslit Nation Q&A bonus show and more live tapings soon. At a certain point, is the establishment, are the security forces of America just so deeply infiltrated by MAGA, by foreign corruption, that the Democrats are just easily just blowing with that wind?
Well, I think the lesson to be taken out of this is that don't expect the political party to save your vote. That's why we have that site, saveyourvote.org. When the Democratic Party had nothing to do with Biden's victory in Georgia, for example, as famously by 11,779 votes, so less than 12,000 votes. That was all done, for example, all these Georgians were challenged by both the state and purged from the voter rolls by the state. Many had their votes blocked or not counted by the Vigilantes, and so and they were a lot of these people came in where they thought they were given provisional ballots. Now, don't ever take a provisional ballot because I call it placebo ballot. You think you voted, but you haven't. And the lady behind the desk, nice as she is, she may not know this. She'll say, "Don't worry, just fill out this. You don't get a regular ballot." And always demand a regular ballot. Say, "No, I'm not accepting a provisional ballot." But if you get a provisional ballot, you have to fill out this form. Your ballot goes in an envelope. You fill out the envelope. Well, it's not going to get counted unless you personally go into your county clerk's office or follow whatever rule. In many states, you have to literally physically go in, and what they call it curing your ballot. What it means is that they didn't like your ID or they couldn't find you. So then you say, here's my latest government photo ID. Here's my proof of address, an electric bill or whatever. It's a whole process. But that was organized not by the Democratic Party. Thousands and thousands and thousands of ballots, provisional ballots, were cured. Thousands of ballots that were being rejected, they forced those ballots to be hand counted, to be counted. And so that's how Biden got that margin. It wasn't the Democratic Party. It was the voting rights group. I work, and you'll see in the film, I work very closely with Black Voters Matter, Latasha Brown and Cliff Albright. Black Voters Matter. I work with the NAACP. I work with the ACLU. I work with several, and of course, Rainbow Push. And so it's but the Democratic Party ain't there now. Which in a way for me it's easier because I'm a reporter. I won't work with the Democratic Party, but they're invisible anyway. I'd have to hunt them down. Be an investigation. Where's the Democrats? Any Democrats here? No, I don't know. It's like they're not. Yeah. So don't count on the political parties to save you.
That's what I say all the time on the show. Grassroots power is the last reliable power we have left.
Yes.